I bought the house more out of nostalgia than necessity. My uncle left it to me in his will, an old craftsman-style place with creaky wood floors, ivy along the fence, and just enough character to charm the hell out of anyone who wasn't allergic to history. I wasn't looking to move, not really, but there was something about that winding gravel driveway and the smell of pine in the morning air that told me, this is yours now. So I packed my city life into boxes, loaded up the truck, and drove 3 hours out to the edge of suburban nowhere to start again. The lot was odd-shaped, wrapping around a small rise in the land that backed onto a narrow wood line. Technically, my backyard had no back because the hill swallowed it from view. That suited me fine. The more irregular, the better. Less chance of nosy neighbors or HOA vampires crawling out of their concrete castles. Or so I thought. The first 2 months were bliss. I patched up the roof, sanded the porch swing, repainted the shutters a deep green that would have made my uncle proud. I kept to myself, and the neighbors seemed to like it that way. I waved, they nodded, and we lived in a polite suburban silence. That peace was short-lived. Enter Marilyn Shaw. She moved into the vacant house next door, a contemporary box with far too many balconies and not nearly enough charm. I spotted her on moving day barking orders at 2 poor movers as they juggled an antique armoire she clearly never intended to lift herself. Platinum blonde hair, aggressively tailored blazer, and a clipboard. I knew the type. She introduced herself that evening, marching up to my porch like she'd scheduled an appointment I forgot to attend. "You must be the new owner," she said, flashing a realtor's smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I'm Marilyn Shaw. I just moved in next door. Lovely to meet you." I put down the hammer and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Daniel Walker. Likewise." She glanced around my porch like she was performing an appraisal. "You've got quite the lot here. Big. Unusual shape." "Yeah, it's old. Pre-zoning irregularity, I think." "Oh, is that so?" she said, lips twitching into something between a smile and a smirk. "Have you had the boundaries verified recently?" That was the first red flag. Nobody makes that their third sentence unless they're digging for something or staking a claim. "I've got the original survey from my uncle's purchase, and a recent copy in my name." "Why?" "Oh, no reason," she said too quickly. "Just, I noticed your fence runs pretty close to what might be my easement line. I'll have to double-check my deed, of course." I raised an eyebrow. "Let me know what you find." That could have been it. An awkward first chat and nothing more. But the next week, I noticed colored tape tied around the base of one of my oak trees. Then another on a garden stake near my shed. They weren't mine. The next encounter was in broad daylight. I was mowing the lawn when she appeared at the edge of her property, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a manila folder. "I had a chance to look at my records," she called out over the mower. "You may be encroaching." I turned the engine off. "Encroaching?" "Onto my property," she said, stepping forward. "I've marked a few questionable spots. Nothing personal, of course, just due diligence." I followed her gaze to the fluorescent flags she'd planted like she was claiming Mars. One was halfway through my vegetable garden. Another brushed the side of my detached garage. That one got my blood pressure ticking. "Marilyn," I said carefully, "these lines haven't changed in decades. My uncle lived here for over 30 years. Nobody's had an issue." "Well, perhaps nobody bothered to check," she replied with a thin smile. "Some of these properties weren't properly aligned with the county's GIS system back then. I know. I work in real estate." There it was, the real estate card, a license to hassle. "You planning to file something official?" I asked. "I'm planning to request a boundary inspection," she said sweetly. Just to clarify things, I'm sure you wouldn't mind. After all, if everything's in order, you've got nothing to worry about, right? That was the beginning. She made it sound like a favor, like she was doing me some charitable act by accusing me of squatting on her land. I should have been angry, but I was mostly stunned. She walked away like she'd just set a timer on a slow-moving bomb. That night, I dug through every document I had. Deeds, plat maps, the survey from last year. Clear lines, no easements, no encroachments. I even pulled up satellite imagery from the county. My fence had been right there for as long as the images went back. But Marilyn wasn't acting like someone confused. She acted like someone certain. That was the unsettling part. 2 days later, she came by again. This time with a folded blueprint under her arm. "I'm having a professional geodetic survey done next week," she announced. "It'll be good for both of us to settle the matter officially. I'm sure you'll cooperate." I didn't like the tone. It wasn't a request. It was a dare. "Sure," I said, my voice flat. "Let's see what the professionals say." She smiled like a predator who'd just convinced dinner to walk into the trap. When she left, I stood there on my porch for a long time, watching the flags flutter in my garden. Something told me this wasn't about a property line. This was about control. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, Marilyn Shaw had set her sights on mine. The flags didn't go anywhere. In fact, by the next morning, there were more of them. Neon orange, pink, and yellow markers now peppered my lawn like some twisted suburban rainbow. I counted 17 just walking from my porch to the mailbox. One of them was stabbed directly into the base of my tomato planter. That one pissed me off more than I expected. Inside the mailbox, among the junk and coupons, was a manila envelope from Marilyn. No stamp, no return address, just my name in sharp black ink. I took it inside and opened it carefully, half expecting a cease and desist written in lipstick. Inside was a formal letter on a real estate agency's letterhead, Marilyn's brokerage, and an attached diagram showing the supposed property line discrepancy. It was laughably crude. Someone had traced an outdated satellite image and drawn a bright red line across my lawn, cutting through my shed and straight through the fire pit I'd built last month. Scribbled underneath in cursive, "Pending survey results. Potential encroachment." She'd even highlighted a note. "Your fence may lie up to 12 feet onto my property. We'll verify shortly." I was torn between laughing and lighting the damn thing on fire. Instead, I scanned it, filed it digitally, and called my lawyer. "Let me guess," said Claudia, my real estate attorney, after I explained the situation. "New neighbor with a God complex and a bad sense of boundaries?" "You're 2 for 2, I said. She reviewed my deed and plat while I paced the porch. "Everything checks out on your end. But if she's commissioning a survey, you should probably get your own done as well, by someone we trust." "Already on it," I replied. "I made some calls this morning." That afternoon, I met with Carla Jennings, a licensed surveyor recommended by Claudia. She was in her late 40s, dressed like she could bench press a toolkit, and had the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had no time for bullshit. We walked the perimeter together. She nodded along as I showed her the existing fence line and mentioned Marilyn's colorful field of flags. "You said her guy is coming out next week?" Carla asked, flipping through the original plat. "Wednesday." She tapped her pencil on the paper. "Tell you what, I've worked with a lot of surveyors in this county. I'll keep an eye out. Sometimes folks hire specialists." Specialists? People who deliver the result the client wants. That gave me pause. "Is that common?" Carla shrugged. "Not common. But it happens, especially when the neighbor's in real estate and has friends in zoning." I didn't sleep well that night. Something about Carla's warning itched under my skin. The next day, I noticed a small drone buzzing just above tree level. It hovered near the backyard for about 2 minutes before zipping back toward Marilyn's property. I didn't have a camera pointed that way yet, but I made a mental note to install one. By Tuesday, Marilyn had escalated. She'd planted a laminated sign at the edge of her lawn that read, "Survey in progress. Do not disturb boundary markers." The sign faced my yard. Cute. Then, the kicker. A knock at my door around noon. I opened it to find a man in a reflective vest holding a clipboard. Early 40s, thinning hair slicked back, mirrored sunglasses. He introduced himself as David Lehman, certified land surveyor, hired by Ms. Shaw. "Just giving you a courtesy heads up," he said with a tight smile. "We'll be surveying her lot tomorrow morning. You may see some of our team walking along your shared boundary." "I assume you'll respect the legal limits," I said evenly. "Of course," he said, already halfway turned around. "We're professionals." As I watched him leave, something about him struck me as too polished. Like a guy used to getting exactly the answer he needed from a yardstick and a handshake. I called Carla. "David Lehman?" she repeated. "You're kidding." "You know him?" "Unfortunately, he used to work for the same firm I used. Booted after an ethics complaint involving, wait for it, boundary manipulation. Not convicted, but blacklisted by most reputable firms." I swore under my breath. "I'll be there in the morning," Carla said. "This stinks." The next morning was a circus. David and his two-man crew showed up in matching polos, pulling wheeled GPS gear and setting up tripods. Marilyn hovered nearby like a hawk with a latte, arms crossed, phone in hand. Carla showed up 10 minutes later, cool and casual. She greeted David like an old acquaintance, which apparently they were. "Still at it, huh?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "Thought you were consulting these days." David's jaw tightened. "I go where the work is." Carla gave me a wink behind his back. "Let's make sure everyone's playing by the same rules then." The surveying went on for hours. At one point, Marilyn tried to block Carla from photographing one of the markers, insisting it was private survey data. Carla gently reminded her that if it was placed on or near my property, I had every right to document it. Marilyn muttered something under her breath and retreated to her porch. By the end of the day, Carla had what she needed. I had a headache, and a growing suspicion this was no ordinary neighbor's spat. And just to sweeten the paranoia Sunday, that evening I noticed someone had placed a flyer on every door along our street. It read, "Protect our property values. Demand compliance from all property owners. Support the HOA's proposed boundary realignment initiative." We weren't even in the HOA district, but it looked like someone was trying to change that, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who. The sun wasn't even over the trees when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Carla had texted me the night before. "Get your coffee early. County guys come at 7 sharp." She wasn't kidding. By the time I stepped onto the porch, mug in hand, 2 trucks were already parked out front, one with county plates, the other from a third-party surveying firm contracted by the city zoning office. Apparently, the drama had reached enough ears downtown that they wanted an official look at whatever war we were about to start. Marilyn was already out, dressed like a real estate version of a SWAT negotiator. Tight pantsuit, clipboard, full face of war paint. She greeted the officials like she was hosting an open house. "Thank you for coming. I just want everything resolved quickly and peacefully," she said, giving me a sideways glance that screamed, "Screw you and your fence." I gave her a tight nod and leaned against the porch post, sipping my coffee. Carla arrived a few minutes later, pulling a wheeled case behind her and wearing the calm smirk of someone who already knew how this was going to end. I liked that about her. We walked the boundary line together with the county officials, accompanied by a woman from the recorder's office, and a young guy with a drone controller who looked terrified to be involved. The first 20 minutes were uneventful. The usual GPS logging, laser measurement, rechecking old plat markers. A few curious neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Then one of the surveyors, bald guy with a thick notebook and a voice like a chainsaw, paused in the middle of Marilyn's driveway and called over his shoulder. "Hey," he said to the recorder's rep, "get over here. We've got a shift." I stepped closer, but Carla raised a hand to hold me back. She listened as they talked in low tones, and then her eyebrows went up. "Well, this should be interesting," she said. I waited, arms crossed, until she turned to me. "Dan, it looks like the eastern corner of her house, garage, deck, and part of the back bedroom are sitting on your land." I blinked. "Come again?" "You own that slope. Her foundation's over the line by at least 10 feet. I stared at the ground, trying to process it. All the flags, the threats, the condescending lectures, and all this time she was the one trespassing. "You're telling me her house is on my property?" 15% of it, give or take. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're kidding." "Nope," Carla said, "and it's not a minor technicality. This is going on record." Marilyn noticed the huddle and marched over. "Excuse me, what's going on?" The county rep turned to her. "Ms. Shaw, based on our findings, it appears a portion of your home extends over Mr. Walker's property line. We'll need to file an encroachment report." For a second, she didn't react. Then, slowly, her face turned a shade of red usually reserved for cartoon villains. "That's impossible. I have the documents right here." She fumbled with her clipboard, yanking out her survey. "David Lehman's report clearly shows—" The official held up a hand. "We reviewed Mr. Lehman's findings. They don't align with the county's records or the physical measurements." That's when Carla stepped forward, arms folded. "And I'd be real careful waving around that survey, Marilyn, because I recognized David's signature, and it doesn't match the one on file with the licensing board." Marilyn's eyes darted between us. "You're accusing me of forgery?" Carla didn't blink. "I'm saying your guy either doctored that survey or signed off on something he didn't verify, and I'm submitting it to the board for review." "This is harassment," Marilyn snapped, voice rising. "You're all working together. This is a setup." The county rep sighed. "Ms. Shaw, we're just reporting what we found. If you dispute the results, you can file a formal objection. Otherwise, we'll be forwarding this to zoning, and you'll be contacted regarding next steps." Marilyn looked like she was about to explode. Her hands clenched the clipboard like she wanted to hurl it into someone's face. She turned on her heel and stormed back toward her house, muttering something about lawyers. I exhaled slowly, watching her march across ground that wasn't legally hers. Carla looked satisfied. "Well, that was fun." "Fun?" I said. "She's going to make my life hell now." "Probably," she admitted, "but at least now she has to do it from the right side of the line." We spent the next half hour finishing the formal documentation. Photos were taken, new markers installed, and the officials left with more notes than they'd probably expected to take. As they packed up, Carla and I stood at the edge of the disputed slope. "Think she'll accept the ruling?" I asked. "Not a chance in hell." "And what happens next?" She looked at me, calm and direct. "She's going to escalate." And she did. 2 days. That's how long it took for Marilyn to bounce back from having her ego surgically removed by the county surveyors. For 48 glorious hours, her house was quiet. No flags, no drones, no surprise confrontations about trespassing begonias. I allowed myself a moment of hope, even grilled a steak in the backyard, like a man who believed the storm had passed. Then came the envelope, thick, embossed, hand-delivered to my mailbox with no return address, because subtlety was apparently dead. Inside, a legal notice drafted by some polished firm downtown. Marilyn, it said, was initiating civil proceedings to reassert boundary entitlements and seek equitable easement adjustments due to long-standing property line ambiguity. Translation: she was suing me for land she didn't own. Claudia read it 3 times before she set it down and poured herself a scotch from the decanter in my living room. "She's really doing it," I muttered. "She's not just doing it," Claudia replied, sipping. "She's doubling down. She's trying to force a mutual boundary resolution. Probably banking on the court, suggesting you sell her the land her house is on rather than making her tear down half of it. Can she do that? She can try, but it'll take money, a lot of it." I looked out the window toward Marilyn's house. The blinds twitched like someone had been watching. "She's not acting alone," I said quietly. Claudia raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "I've seen the signs, literally. Flyers all over the street last week about the HOA expansion initiative. The thing is, we're not in an HOA district, but they're acting like it's already happening." Claudia leaned forward. "Are you saying she's working with them?" "I'm saying someone wants my land, and she's the smiling face they sent to get it." She chewed that over, then stood and grabbed her coat. "Get ready, Dan. This isn't about boundary lines anymore." She was right, because the next evening I got a knock at the door. Standing on my porch were 3 very official-looking people, 2 men in khakis and polos with HOA badges, and 1 woman in heels who introduced herself as Cheryl Sloan, the president of the Regional Homeowners Association. "We're reaching out to local residents to discuss the upcoming integration of this block into the Morning Hills Community Zone," she said smoothly, handing me a brochure that looked like it had been printed at a campaign headquarters. "Integration?" I said. "You mean takeover?" She laughed as if I'd made a dad joke. "Dan, we prefer to think of it as inclusion." There's been a lot of support for expanding the HOA's coverage to better reflect the needs of the neighborhood. I didn't sign anything. You wouldn't have had to yet. The board is initiating a preemptive resolution process. Once the majority threshold is met, well, you'd be surprised how many neighbors appreciate a little order. "Let me guess," I said. "Marilyn's one of them." Cheryl gave a professional shrug, but I saw it. The flicker in her expression, like a chess player who just realized I'd spotted the trap 4 moves early. "Of course, we work with many concerned residents." "Did you help fund her lawsuit?" Her eyes didn't move. "I'm not at liberty to discuss another resident's legal affairs." "So that's a yes." "Dan, we're just here to help." "No, you're here to claim jurisdiction over land that doesn't belong to you by backing a woman who's already been caught lying about her property lines. That's not help. That's strategic harassment." The 2 men shifted awkwardly. Cheryl straightened her skirt. "We'll give you some time to review the materials." "Don't waste the paper," I said, and shut the door. The next morning, I discovered someone had tossed 3 bags of yard waste over my fence. Not dumped, tossed. Deliberately. Like a message. Like a warning. I installed 2 more cameras that day. 1 on the fence line. 1 above the shed. Then I walked the perimeter, recording every inch of it on my phone. 2 days later, I received a brown envelope from an anonymous sender. Inside were scanned emails between Marilyn, Cheryl, and someone listed only as Board Legal Group. The subject line? Strategy Doc for Walker Parcel. HOA Leverage Options. There were lines highlighted in red. If Marilyn can establish public interest argument, We may be able to petition city for retroactive zoning overlay. Survey controversy useful. Recommend amplifying perception of confusion. Push narrative. Dan, as difficult outsider. We can support legal costs discreetly through MHC Housing Improvement Fund. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. I forwarded everything to Claudia. Her reply came within 15 minutes. We're not in a property dispute anymore. We're in a coordinated land acquisition attempt. Let's go nuclear. That night, I created a Google Drive folder titled Evidence HOA Coercion. I uploaded every document, photo, and message I had. Then I sent it anonymously to 3 local journalists and posted it uncensored on Reddit under the title HOA Trying to Steal My Land by Funding My Neighbor's Fake Lawsuit. Here's proof. Within 24 hours, it had over 40,000 upvotes. And for the first time since Marilyn knocked on my door with that fake smile, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I didn't expect the Reddit post to go viral. One moment, I was refreshing the thread like a caffeine-addicted teenager. The next, I was fielding emails from 3 local reporters, 1 podcaster, and a real estate watchdog blog that specialized in property right horror stories. Apparently, I was the new poster boy for HOA overreach. The story took off faster than I could track. People latched onto the David Lehman angle, the forged survey, the secret emails. Hell, someone even made a meme of Marilyn standing in her driveway labeled, "When you lose your house to greed instead of termites." By the end of the week, Claudia called me, half laughing, half serious. "You've become a legal land influencer," she said. "Be careful. Viral outrage is great, but courts don't care about memes." I knew she was right. This wasn't one online. It had to be one in court. And the courtroom didn't disappoint. The day of the hearing, the gallery was packed. Reporters in the back row, a few neighbors pretending not to stare, and Marilyn at the defense table in a sharp navy blue suit that looked like it had been tailored to hide how cornered she really was. Her lawyer, a man who reeked of expensive coffee and desperation, sat stiffly beside her, flipping through folders like he was hoping a miracle would crawl out and take the stand. Claudia was ice, calm, controlled, terrifying in a polite, razor-sharp way. She presented everything in order: survey results, zoning maps, historical plats, the drone footage showing the actual fence line, and then the emails. The judge's expression didn't change much until Claudia read the one about Marilyn amplifying confusion and portraying me as a difficult outsider. That one got a blink. When she got to the part about the MHC Housing Improvement Fund discreetly backing her legal bills, his brow creased for the first time. Marilyn's lawyer objected, claimed the emails were inadmissible, anonymous, unverifiable, possibly fabricated. That's when Claudia dropped the hammer. She'd subpoenaed the domain registrar for MHC Group. The IP matched an internal HOA management system. The emails were real. Boom. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. David Lehman was called to the stand. Not by us. By the court. Apparently, the licensing board had opened a file on him based on our complaints and the public leak. And now he was under review for survey fraud. They wanted his testimony on record. He looked like a man aging 10 years by the minute. He tried to spin it, said it was a preliminary draft, that Marilyn had misunderstood the scope, that he hadn't intended it to be used for legal filings. Claudia slid a photo across the table. One of the survey stamped and signed, posted on Marilyn's porch a week before the suit. He stammered, then cracked. "She pushed me to do it," he said. "I told her it wasn't final. She said no one would challenge it, that the HOA would back her." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The judge recessed for the day. I walked out of the courthouse into a wall of questions. I ignored them all, but when I got home, there was a message on my voicemail, dry and shaky. It was Marilyn's lawyer. "We're interested in negotiating a settlement." I didn't respond. The next morning, I received a courier envelope. Inside was an offer, a land use agreement, 10-year lease for the encroached property, generous rent, non-disparagement clause, mutual drop of all legal claims. It even included a confidentiality bonus if I signed within 48 hours. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my toast. Claudia drafted the response. No deal, no lease, no settlement. We were going to trial. The next week, Marilyn's legal team filed a motion to withdraw from the case, citing irreconcilable differences and non-payment of fees. Translation: she couldn't afford them anymore. Word on the street was her insurance provider had denied coverage due to fraud and misrepresentation of property details. Without that, she was on her own. The image of Marilyn, the queen of passive-aggressive turf wars, now scrambling for pro bono representation, was almost too poetic. But the part that really made my day? The HOA went dark. No more flyers. No more visits. Their website redirected to a maintenance page. Rumor had it, their own internal investigation had launched, and Cheryl Sloan had taken a leave of absence. My inbox, once a minefield of HOA newsletters and legal threats, was quiet. It was like someone had pulled the plug on a bad dream. I stood in my yard one evening, staring at the crooked line where Marilyn's deck jutted over my land like an awkward elbow. It looked different now, smaller, fragile, the kind of thing built on lies and bad assumptions. And it was starting to fall apart. The eviction notice didn't come from me. It came from reality. A month after the courtroom implosion, Marilyn's house went on the market. Though the listing carefully omitted any mention of the encroachment issue, the lawsuit, or the HOA scandal now attached to her name like a permanent tattoo. But Zillow has a way of catching whispers. By the second week, the listing had more comments than offers. One simply read, "Great view, shame about the fraud." Claudia had warned me this might happen. When someone builds on land that doesn't belong to them and refuses a settlement, the options shrink fast. The judge's final ruling had been clear. Remove the encroaching structure within 90 days or begin paying market-rate rent with back pay. Marilyn had neither the money nor the time. She tried appealing. The appeal was denied in under 2 weeks. Then came the demolition order. On a cool Tuesday morning, I sipped coffee on my porch and watched as 2 contractors unbolted her garage door, piece by piece. They were polite, almost apologetic. "Just doing what the court ordered," one of them said. I nodded and didn't say a word. By the end of the week, her deck was gone. The corner of the house now hung awkwardly in the air, like a secret exposed to daylight. It wasn't malicious, just math. You build where you don't own, you pay, or you lose. Neighbors stopped pretending not to notice. A few came by to say things like, "Good for you, standing your ground," or "Can't believe the HOA backed that circus." One even brought pie. Southern apology style. Speaking of the HOA, what was left of it, turns out the internal audit confirmed everything. Cheryl Sloan had been funneling discretionary funds into community initiatives, which just happened to align with Marilyn's legal expenses. Once the leak hit the papers, the board dissolved itself in record time. There would be no more expansion, no more passive-aggressive newsletters about lawn height. The neighborhood, for once, felt free. Claudia filed to have the encroached portion of land re-registered, with fresh boundary markers and a permanent restriction barring future claims. When I signed the final form at the county office, the clerk, An older man with bushy eyebrows and a tired smile looked up and said, "You're that guy, right? The one with the neighbor who tried to steal your land?" I shrugged. "Guess so." He stamped the paper with a loud, satisfying thunk. "Well, you got it back." The house next door sat empty for a while. Then one Saturday, a moving truck appeared. A young couple stepped out, late 20s, laptops in tow, clearly remote workers with too much enthusiasm and too few questions about the property's colorful past. They came over that evening with beers and awkward smiles. "We heard there was history with the lot," the guy said carefully. I nodded. "It's been handled." He laughed. "Good, because we don't plan on claiming your tomatoes." We toasted over the fence. Sometimes peace doesn't come from compromise. Sometimes it comes from holding the damn line. 3 months later, the neighborhood had grown quieter. Not just in sound, but in energy. No more boundary markers popping up like mushrooms. No HOA foot soldiers in pressed polos, slipping flyers into mailboxes. The silence was almost suspicious at first. Then it became pleasant. Then it became mine. I spent most weekends in the yard. The side Marilyn had tried to claim was now open, clean, reseeded, and framed by a new fence I installed myself. Cedar, sturdy, with metal brackets sunk deep into the earth. Permanent, legal, defended. Just beyond it, where her garage used to be, the new owners planted native shrubs and strung up solar lights. We chatted now and then, nice folks, tech people, always polite. They never asked questions about what used to be there, but they always nodded respectfully at the property line, like they understood that respect was part of the deal. I decided to have some fun with it. One Saturday morning, I installed a custom-made sign on the fence. It was brass, laser-etched, and a little over the top, just the way I wanted it. It read, "Private property, 0% encroachment since 2025. Within the hour, the new neighbors came over laughing and brought a six-pack. "That's iconic," the guy said. "Can we make t-shirts?" "Give it time," I grinned. "There might be a whole merch line." That afternoon, a few other neighbors wandered over. Someone fired up a grill. A folding table appeared with coleslaw and deviled eggs like it had been summoned from thin air. One neighbor brought a tiny plastic fence with a toy bulldozer on top and labeled it HOA Memorial. Carla even showed up with a bottle of wine and a smirk. "Told you we'd bury them." As the sun dipped behind the hill and the sky turned that soft, bruised purple of a southern evening, I stood by the new fence with a cold beer in hand. Kids ran past playing tag. Laughter rolled lazily across the lawn. No more fights, no more flags, no more suits. Just land, mine, held not by aggression or trickery or paper games, but by truth, and the long, stubborn refusal to back down.